A lot of people ask me what's in my camera bag, and this might be important information for you to better understand how I shoot and why I use what I use. I'm going to tell you everything, but I want to start with the stuff that has absolutely nothing to do with cameras. So I have an emergency kit. It's not glamorous, but it's important. I will carry like safety pins, a Tide pin, pain reliever, band-aids, bobby pins, sometimes like bra tape if I have it, breath mints. I always carry a crochet hook for like dresses that have a lot of buttons. It makes it go a lot easier. And I usually have like hair ties and stuff like that. But a sewing kit it's been used. And I'm not the coordinator, but I've been to enough weddings that I know like it takes me 10 seconds to reach into my fanny pack and grab something like a safety pin when your bustle breaks or whatever, and then we just keep rolling. So it's like I might as well just have it. I always carry like rain covers for my cameras. I've only needed to use them like a couple of times because my cameras are water resistant. So like, you know, if it's sprinkling or whatever, I'm like, well, it's not a big deal. But I have shot in like the pouring down, drenching rain before, and I had to break those out along with my prop umbrellas. So that's pretty important. I make sure if I'm looking at the weather, I'm like, yeah, I always have that stuff in a rain jacket. But on the flip side of that, I like to bring electrolytes. I've made the mistake of not doing that, and I won't make that mistake again. I was like driving home from a wedding and I thought I was gonna pass out, and I had to go to the gas station and get some electrolytes. So like, I always try to stay hydrated, and I try to bring like a Cliff Bar, like whatever I'm feeling that day, whatever I can get from the gas station on the way to the venue, because it is hot in Texas no matter what, and I want to make sure that I'm like not passing out when I'm trying to do my job. We work really hard, so you know, got to eat like an athlete. I also carry extra batteries and memory cards, of course. I have multiple batteries for each camera body. I usually shoot with 2 cameras. And so I'll have multiple batteries with chargers to go with them, and I'll like swap them out throughout the night. And I always bring more memory cards than I think, and I always shoot to 2 memory cards, so there's always 4 memory cards on me. So if something happens to one of them, I'm like, oh, well, no big deal. I've got everything, literally everything captured on a whole other card. So, and that has happened before. Sometimes cards will get corrupted or whatever, stuff will happen, and I'm like, I have a backup. So that's another lesson you only have to learn once, but thankfully I was doing something for myself when that happened. So now I will talk about my cameras. I use a Nikon Z6 II and a Nikon Z5. They're mirrorless cameras. It makes light changing situations like really easy to work with, going from like ceremony to reception, and it's like really dark and really bright. It makes it easier to see what I'm shooting and make sure that like my settings aren't crazy. So I really love using my mirrorless cameras. So my lenses, what I'm using will be determined on like where I am, what I'm doing. So like getting ready. The quarters are usually cramped. The lighting is usually very low. Some venues have really great getting ready rooms, and I love that. I really appreciate that, but most getting ready rooms are just not really great. So I'm usually using my 35mm because it can get those wide shots in a cramped space, but it also has an aperture of 1.8, which means that it can let a lot of light in, and I don't have to turn my ISO up super high and get grainy photos and stuff like that, so it just keeps the quality in check. But I also use my 50mm as well, and these are what I call prime lenses. They're not zoom. It's like you have one focal length, that's it. But the trade-off is like you get a bigger aperture, so you can let in more light. So in low light situations, I'm always going for my 35, my 50, or my 85. My 50mm has an aperture of 1.2, which is so nice. It takes the most crisp, clean, beautiful, creamy background pictures. I always use it for portraits. It's probably my favorite lens. It's amazing. It looks amazing, and it's cost me a lot of money. But like for detail shots, I'll usually use one of those prime lenses because it has such a short focal length. It really, like, you know, you can get those rings really, really sharp as long as they're in focus. And that's a, you know, a challenge. You have to make sure it is in focus. Like this one tiny little sparkle on the ring, it's got to be in focus. So I love using my prime lenses for that. And then I will use my zoom lenses for things like the ceremony, especially if the ceremony is outdoors and the light is super bright. I don't need to worry about having that super wide aperture, because if it's so sunny, I'm gonna shrink my aperture. As I personally think that looks better than going way up on your shutter speed and making it super fast. Like, I do that too, but I like to use a combination of going up on the aperture and going up on the shutter speed. I think it preserves some of those shadows and highlights and makes them not so harsh when I go up on the aperture rather than the shutter speed. Maybe I'm crazy, but that's just how I feel. So that's how I shoot. But I'll always have, usually in those sunny situations, my 24-70 zoom lens, and then my, what is it? 70-180 actually. It is not a 70-200, it is a 70-180. And I got that because it was like $1,000 cheaper than the 70-200, and you really can't tell the difference. Like between 180mm and 200mm is whatever, you know. So I use that to get the faces when the couple is like walking down the aisle, their faces when they see each other, and then exchanging of the rings. I can get those really close up, intimate looking shots without actually like being in your face. So it enables me to not have to move around as much and be in the way. I try to be like as respectful as possible, especially if we're like in an indoor situation, a church or something, or just a kind of a cramped ceremony space. I just try to be really incognito, but also not without, I'm not sacrificing like the quality of the shots that I'm getting. However, if I am inside in that low light, I will still use, it depends. It depends on if the ceremony space is smaller or larger. Like if I'm shooting in a Catholic church, it's usually big and it's, you know, grandiose and there's a lot of space, and I'm gonna want to use like a 24mm or a 35mm because the lighting is low and I need to get those wide shots, but I also really need to use a zoom lens, like my 70-180, to get in there and get some really close-up stuff without, you know, actually walking around and things like that. And for Catholic ceremonies and other types of religious ceremonies, I will, usually they ask me to just, you know, sit down and don't do anything and be respectful and all that, and that's what I do. But for the times where I am moving around, that's I'm either using my 35 millimeter and my 70 to 180, or I'm using my 35 and like my 85 because of that prime lens with the really wide aperture, lets in lots of light. So, but I'm usually not changing lenses unless I want to get a very specific type of shot, like a big wide angle. I'll use like a 16 millimeter. That's like what you would use in real estate photography. It's pretty wide, but yeah, I can use that for super big wide shots of the ceremony space, and I'm always gonna want to stick with those like zoom, that's especially the 70 to 180 for those close-up shots. Even for some of the wedding party portraits, I will still use like my 50 millimeter because it just makes beautiful, beautiful portraits. It just looks, because 50 millimeter is the length that is most natural to our eyes. So it looks the most similar to how we perceive the world. So like our eyeballs are 50 millimeter lenses, basically, I guess. Yeah, I'll always be using that 50 millimeter for portraits, especially couples golden hour portraits. But I also really, really love to use some other lenses like my 24 or my 35 for a big cinematic wide shot type of feel, especially if you're in a place that's very picturesque, which most of my weddings are. Also, I do hire a drone operator for some of those shots as well, because I ain't that tall. I can't get up there. But the prime lenses that I use for portraits have a more artistic portrait-like rendering than the zooms. So they feel more intentional, and you know, the light coming through the trees, it's really, it's great. So, and for the reception, especially like first dances, speeches, those types of reception activities, not necessarily the dancing, I do use a combination of like probably if it's a big space, I'll use my 50 and the 70 to 180. And I might put a flash on it, just depending on what I can get away with in there. But if I don't need a flash, I try not to use a flash because that's more for like creative type of shots. But I do bring that 70 to 180 back for the speeches because I want to be able to zoom in on their faces. And I hate getting in front of people when they're trying to listen to these speeches. Like, I hate being in the way for speeches because speeches are usually pretty good. So I try to stay out of the way as much as possible. And so I get out that, what I call my super zoom lens for that. But I also do get a wide shot, or wide shots of the whole reception space, you know, the couple at the sweethearts table and their guests and everyone watching the person making the toast and that kind of stuff. But for dancing and reception, like the candids, I will switch between, I'll usually put on my 24 to 70 with a flash. I use just a Godox flash, and I'll do shutter drag and just some fun like high flash paparazzi feel shots with that. And then I'll use my 50 millimeter for the very artistic, intimate looking, like people dancing, and the DJ's lights that are in the back, just like super bokeh. And bokeh, if you don't know, is like when everything's fuzzy in the back. So when the DJ has his lights going, it can make some really cool effects. And you know, you can use like canned atmosphere or fog machine and make it even better. But I also have like star filters and fun stuff. Like the reception is my time where I get to just play around and just make the funnest party photos I can manage. And the reception is usually my favorite part, other than couples photos, of course. And I do love the ceremony because I've seen some really unique ones, and I really enjoy that. But yeah, the reception is definitely the most fun part of the night because I get in there, I dance with the crowd, because if I'm not in the crowd, I'm not getting great photo. I mean, I can get good photos without being in the crowd, but you know, I've got to get in there. And I can't just get in there and be still because people are going to hit me. So I gotta dance. So yeah, that's definitely the best part of the night. And then for the send-off, I'll usually stick with everything I had for the dance floor. And if I can, I'll try to switch between flash and non-flash for the send-off. If you have sparklers, it's a little bit easier because it's more light for me. But if it's like bubbles or something like that and it's dark outside, I'll use a flash, and the flash will reflect those bubbles and it makes it look really fun, like so many bubbles. And my bag will look a little bit different for every wedding because I like to figure out what types of photos I want, what's the vibe, what filters do I need to bring, like what are we going for. But generally, yeah, that's what I have. I got my camera bodies, all of my extras, extra cards, batteries, and then I'll have like 5 or 6 lenses with me. And sometimes I just get in a mood where I'm like, yeah, I'm really feeling my 35. I'm gonna use it all the time, and it's my heavy rotation. And other times it just like really depends what mood I'm in, and maybe that's just part of being an artist. But if you are getting married in Austin or the Hill Country and you want someone who shows up with a plan, my booking link is in the description.